Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 96 of Fracking Nightmare. Now, last week I was in Manchester and had a very new experience. I was sitting monitoring the IPCC hearing, which was there to consider the behaviour of a senior Greater Manchester police officer at Barton Moss. So I covered this at the time. It was 2.5 years ago. This is January the 14th, 2014, so 2.5 years ago. The officer in question was Inspector David Kehoe, and the incident became known as Teagate, because this is where Inspector Kehoe, acting as an evidence gatherer on that particular day, falsely accused Dr. Stephen Pears of having been drinking and also driving. Now, this has been dragging on for some time, and we'll talk about the process that has ensued in the interim a little bit later on. But to refresh your memory, let's take a look at the video that was recorded by Dr. Pears across the 6 minutes or so of this incident. So take a look at this.
Away. Away with that. You read Jordan line, please. So you have to say, mate. Do me a favour. Line now, please.
You're part of the protest group. Just chat minutes to get.
Go on, we've got a legal observer there.
You've got one. You need to go over there, other side of that map, over there. Get over there. You're part of that group.
You're assaulting me, please.
I'm not assaulting you. I'm moving you, and I'm helping you into that line. I could arrest you, but I'm not going to arrest you. So it's in your benefit. Are you drunk? Have you been drinking this morning? You've been drinking this morning?
No, I've not.
You've been drinking this morning?
No, I've not.
You've been drinking?
I've had tea.
You've arrived in your car?
No, I've not.
You've arrived in your car this morning? You've had a drink, haven't you? You've had a drink this morning. Where's your car? Been drinking this morning?
No, I've not.
You just said to me you've had 2 drinks.
No, I've not.
You just said that you've had 2 drinks.
I've got it on camera.
Yeah, you just said to me you've had 2 drinks.
No,
I can smell alcohol in your breath and you've come in a car.
No,
when did you have your drinks this morning?
Am I being arrested, officer?
No, I'm making inquiries to see if you're unfit. Hey, Stephen, will you listen to me? Listen to me. Just get the... not going anywhere. You've been detained at this moment in time. Have you got this lad that's coming in the car this morning? I can smell alcohol on his breath. He's already admitted to having a drink.
No. I've got it on film.
Yeah,
I've not had a drink at all. I've had tea this morning, officer.
We've got two officers.
Boss, yeah, no
yeah, and we'll...
We've lost quite most of mine. I've gone down watching M3.
Right.
I've lost most of my cereal.
Okay, your car is down there, Stephen, is it not? Your blue Mercedes. Where have you had a drink this morning?
I have not. I've told you, I've had tea this morning.
Daniel, can you go and join that group, please?
Yeah, I've literally just woke up, mate.
Yeah, can you go and join that group, please? You're going to put there, you know what it is? Stephen's had a drink this morning.
No, I've not. I had tea this morning. You can check with the whole camp.
Here you go. When have you had a drink? Can you, and he's under arrest. Keep on shouting at me. Because you're murdering me.
Am I being detained?
You're detained this moment in time to ascertain whether or not you've been drink driving. It's as simple as that. I can smell alcohol in your breath. And we're going to walk down there. And do you consent to a roadside breath test?
No.
You don't?
No.
Right then. I'm going to stop here. Just come to this wagon here. I'm going to...
Am I under arrest?
You're detained. It's as simple as that. You're detained.
Am I under arrest?
You're detained.
Am I under arrest?
You are detained for this purpose.
It's a simple question.
Have you got in there? Yeah, you are detained. Have you got any staff in there? Have you got a breath kit in there? Right. You're detained for just 1 minute.
I'm a pedestrian on a public footpath. I'm a pedestrian on a public footpath.
Just get 2 staff here.
I'm a pedestrian.
They're going to go through the drink drive procedure with you.
I'm a pedestrian on a public footpath.
Okay. Short officers here.
I'm a pedestrian on a public footpath.
You've also been drinking and you've also come in your car this morning.
I'm a pedestrian on a public footpath.
Got 2 gents here, and can you go through? This chap has arrived in the car this morning. He's been drinking. Can you go through the drink drive procedure with him? Because I suspect that he's arrived here drunk in a car this morning. So we go through that process. There's a breath kit over there. You're right with that? I've got a breath kit here. If another officer just stays with this chap here, because he's been quite vociferous this morning.
I'm a pedestrian on a public footpath, officer.
Believe that you've been driving here.
Well, you would need to locate a motor vehicle then to prove that.
You're right to go through that procedure.
So I'm going to carry out a roadside breathalyzer procedure.
I've not been driving, officer, so I've no reason to.
You have. So I'm going to ask you to provide a specimen of breath.
I'm a pedestrian on a public footpath. You have not detained me behind a wheel, officer.
You don't have to be behind the wheel. If we suspect you've been driving whilst drinking.
At this moment in time, we're only asking you to provide a specimen of breath.
What for? I'm not driving.
You're not under arrest. If you refuse to provide a specimen of
breath, you will be arrested.
You will be arrested. It is an offence to refuse to provide. Do you consent to provide a specimen of breath
I
for
do
analysis?
not consent.
Okay, you do not consent. Just confirm that.
I do not consent.
I'm
going to ask you again that
6698, I do not consent because I am not driving, I'm on a public footpath.
You don't need to be driving, it's suspicious you've driven here whilst under the influence of alcohol.
You're required to provide a specimen.
I'm on a public footpath. I'm being detained unlawfully.
It's a highway.
It's a public footpath.
Okay.
There are signs at the top of the road I can point out to you.
Are you going to provide a specimen of breath?
I am not driving.
Are you going to provide a specimen of breath analysis?
I am not driving.
Failure to provide a specimen of breath will render you liable to.
If I gave you a specimen of breath,
yeah.
I'm not driving. I'm not committing any kind of offence.
Yes or no? Right. These are your 2 options. You can consent to provide a specimen of breath for analysis. You've been seen driving this morning. We suspect you've been drinking.
Absolutely not. That's a lie, officer. That's a lie, officer. That's a lie, officer.
You cannot consent to provide a specimen of breath. If you do not consent, this is your last warning. You will be arrested for failing to provide a specimen of breath. Do you consent to provide a specimen of breath?
I do not consent to provide a specimen of breath.
You're under arrest for failing to provide a specimen of breath. You don't have to say anything that might harm your defence. Not mention when questioned something which later in court. Anything you do say.
Well, needless to say, Steve, I'm sure that day is indelibly printed on your mind, January the 14th. Interestingly, it was also, I believe, the day that iGas stock started the long journey south. So who knows? Who knows?
Something strange, yes.
You know, very, very strange coincidence. Now, okay, so we understood there, obviously, from that video, which was the video from your video camera. The police, of course, were also recording it because Inspector Kehoe was at the Barton Moss location as an evidence gatherer himself. And in fact, I think we have a photograph of him. Here we go. Photograph of him there in his role as evidence gatherer. Now, I must confess that he always gave me the impression that he really thought he should be in charge of the whole policing operation. And, you know, it was almost like he had a grudge that he was only there as an evidence gatherer because he clearly overstepped the line of that role a number of times during the 5 months or so of the Barton Moss campaign. So we saw him make the accusation. You could very clearly state that you'd had tea. He said you've told me you had 2. He told the officers that he had seen you driving, despite your denials. One of the police constables there actually said you have been seen driving. So the police constable clearly understood from his inspector that his inspector was absolutely sure of his facts that you had been driving, and therefore he wanted you to take the breathalyzer. You did not consent. So take us from that point forward. What happened then?
From the actual arrest.
But yeah, after the video stopped. So what happened from that point forward?
Well, you can see the officer reach over to the camera and hit the power button on the actual camcorder, and that turned the video off. In effect, I think a few officers had trained to do that because I've seen it done with other devices on that. So they worked out strategies for dealing with cameras and other filming material, live streaming, mobile phones and things like that. And they had this policy of removing them and keeping them for as long as possible to stop any of the recording of what was going on. After I was arrested that day, I was put into the one of their detention vans with Colin and Olive, who I was filming their arrest. And I ended up back at Swinton Police Station in their detention facility, where they wanted to remove me rather quickly from their van. And I recorded, well, I did a subject data access request for the CCTV footage from the Swinton Police Station and recovered the footage there of them dragging me out of the detention van into the cells quite violently.
Okay, so because initially, I mean, if I understood what was discussed at the hearing, I mean, they claimed that you refused to actually get out of the van.
The van, when it was leaving, they were saying like, we've got more people to load on, and they said, right, okay, we're going to go and empty it quickly. And I thought, well, that's not what was discussed with me at all. So when they asked me to come out of the van, I simply said, no, I'm quite happy in this cell. I was already under arrest, so I had no reason to rush out of the van just because they said so. But they took no time to negotiate. They just moved straight to physically trying to remove me out of the van. Okay,
so then they got you into the custody suite. And now at the hearing, the now retired custody sergeant claimed that, in his opinion, you appeared drunk. I mean, was there any mention of that or reference of that when you were actually in the police station, to the best of your recollection?
Absolutely not. There was no suggestion of that. It was just a case of we want you to cooperate, hand over your property and that. And as far as I was concerned, I was there, unlawfully, and they had no right to conduct any search of me, to remove any property. The camcorder had already been taken by the inspector at the scene, which I thought he's collaring the evidence directly to interfere with like video footage I have of quite a violent arrest of Colin at that particular time, just before my arrest.
And of course, I mean, let's make it clear at this point that what we saw there with Colin and Olive, who are two of the calmest people that you could actually imagine. And although Colin, does try and talk to the police to educate them, I would never suggest for one moment that either Colin or Olive have ever made, if you like, an attempt to do anything other than protest peacefully. And this was clearly Colin and Olive's day, because as we know at Barton Moss, there were certain individuals who were identified right from the get-go. And, it was just a question of looking for the slightest excuse to arrest them. And as, of course, we know, it was generally, if there were going to be any arrests, it was 5 a day. And that was pretty consistent. That seemed to be perhaps all they could handle. So you were filming as a lawful observer. You were filming the arrests of Colin and Olive. And then it looked as though the police officer actually pushed you to the ground. Although, of course, this was presented at in court or in the hearing as you being unsteady on your feet.
I was knocked to the ground twice on that day. We've got separate footage there of where I'm knocked down, and they knocked somebody else down at the same time as me. I was approached from behind and knocked down. So I didn't have a clear view, and playing the footage back, we didn't get a clear view of the officer that had actually knocked me to the ground the first time. But the second assault couldn't be clearer. The officer stops, twists. Well, he breaks away from Colin, who's got 3 of the officers on him. As you say, a perfectly peaceful guy wouldn't resist at all, but they were physically bending his arm up his back and twisting it violently. And one of the officers broke away from that to deal with the camera that I was filming the incident with, and he just grabbed me on the lapels and threw me in front of the lorry, extremely violently. That formed the basis of the original police complaint, the fact that I'd been assaulted and the fact that I'd been wrongfully arrested.
Okay, so and we saw Kehoe obviously basically trying to maneuver you forward back to the front line, and that was where he almost changed tack, because he was moving you along, and then all of a sudden he starts this line of thinking where he's convinced that you have been drinking, and then that's of course where things go south from there. So now roll the clock forward, because you're arrested, you're initially charged. How long was it before the charges were actually dropped?
We went all the way to court, and at the first court hearing, I maintained common law jurisdiction, and the prosecution withdrew the case at the first opportunity, and obviously the case was dismissed. And then I started the process of trying to get my camera back, which was proved extremely difficult because they just didn't want to hand it back for some reason. So that process started, and obviously the police complaints went in straight away. And this wasn't the first police complaint. I'd already complained about Inspector Kehoe a week before this incident for the same type of threatening behaviour. He was threatening to arrest me on that. And I got the footage of that. He was saying to me, "You're not an observer," which was clearly incorrect. Anybody who adopts the observer, bibs and goes to these protests, they should be respected by the police as observers. But the police seem to want to dominate the whole of the protest area, and as we saw at the tribunal hearing, they had nominated their own observer, and they weren't going to recognise anybody else but that one person that they had appointed, and that's just not the way that the observer system works. The Green and Black Cross send out observers to these protests, and we had, I think, about three or four on that particular day. It's a case of GMP selectively recognising an observer status when they choose to do so.
Now, that was a very interesting comment, wasn't it, at the hearing? That whether it was certainly alluded to that the police really don't like the plethora of cameras at events like this, and that absolutely endorses how essential it is to have as many people live streaming and filming these events. Now, we also know that there have been situations where the police have managed to get the 3 or 4G connections actually shut down so that it's not possible to live stream. So it's even more important, to make sure that both are available. And by the way, I also notice now that GMP officers are actually wearing lapel cameras, and they actually flash a green light when they're filming.
I found that very interesting. I did question a few of the officers in GMP HQ about that, and one officer told me that the reports of complaints against the police had fallen dramatically upon the introduction of those body cameras. So they're a good sign. It doesn't bode well when GMP go to court cases and provide highly edited footage. They should have a policy of providing the footage, as I did on this occasion and many other occasions, to the courts, totally unedited. And in of the 300 arrests on Barton Moss, many of those cases were thrown out because the prosecution supplied footage was highly edited, and the soundtracks just did not match up with what they provided. Having that independent camera on scene is very important. So I'd encourage anybody to, if they're going to go to a protest, take some recording equipment. I mean, you've got cameras built into your mobile phones. While you're there, just click record on it, because they can't shut down all the electronic devices. They can attack the 4G for live streams, but they can't seize everybody. In the 21st century, it's surprising how little footage that we get out of this kind of action when the police are involved. There should be a lot more cameras, and the scrutiny helps to force the authorities into recognising these Articles 10 and 11 of the European Convention that gives everybody the right to go out and peacefully protest, as the whole of the Barton Moss protest was totally peaceful. And we just saw total brutality from GMP, who were determined to shove the lorries through to the iGas compound at any cost. This is just one complaint that's taken 3 years to get to the IPCC, and they forced GMP to have a gross misconduct hearing. That gross misconduct is on that officer's record. So in my mind, the fact that we've got this far with it is a success, and GMP should be put on notice that the public are not going to tolerate their violence and disrespect of lawful protest. If we don't have peaceful protest, what else is there, right? When we see something as bad as fracking come into the UK shores, what are we supposed to do about it if we cannot peacefully protest?
Absolutely. And interestingly, of course, the vast majority of arrests that have occurred, whether they be at Balcombe, Barton Moss, Upton, Crawberry Hill, or anywhere else, any of the other events have been thrown out. Obviously, there's a few where there have been lock-ons, but the vast majority of the obstruction arrests have either not made it to court or have been dismissed in the courts. And obviously, this is the way it has to continue. And the footage, as you rightly say, has played a significant role in that. I mean, at Barton Moss, there was a number of people live streaming. There was also a number of people filming in HD, and that footage was made available to the legal representatives of the people that had been arrested. And obviously, as you rightly say, it did play a part in a lot of the cases being dismissed. So let's come back to the hearing now. Because I wasn't able to sit in the same room, but actually that to some extent worked to my advantage. The public gallery was actually on the outskirts of Manchester at Haywood Police Station. And I had to register to attend. And the hearing was due to start on last Monday, but of course it was put off because some legal arguments were being presented. So it didn't actually start until Tuesday morning. So I was in the gallery, where I had an escort of 2 serving police officers who were there for crowd control. And don't know what they thought I was going to do. But and the technician who was maintaining the live stream. And I have to say that I was certainly treated with much courtesy. So I'm grateful to those officers for their hospitality at Haywood Police Station, which meant that, of course, I was sitting remotely, but I was able to see and hear all the 3 days of proceedings. I didn't go back on Friday morning because the only thing still to be read out was the final decision. So now I know you didn't see the first part of it, but overall, What was your, before we get on to the verdict, but what was your impression of the way proceedings were conducted?
Well, it was bizarre. It's not like any court cases I've ever been to. Like they didn't seem to follow civil procedure rules or criminal procedure rules. So it was a narrow sort of hearing, an administrative hearing, I'd call it, where they were very selective on the evidence that they allowed into it, and they just seemed to narrow in things like the camera seized. I know for a fact it was not booked into the property office because I was onto that property office the minute that the case was dropped at court, demanding the return of my video camera, and I was told quite frankly it's not in the property office. It's in the possession of that particular officer. So the selective admission of certain types of evidence and how they were gonna deal with it was totally bizarre. I didn't have a clue of the footage that was being shown or the fact that it was edited. If those points had been raised before the hearing, I would have made strong objections to it.
That's probably why they kept me 20 miles away at Haywood Police Station, because I wasn't aware until I went back and checked with the original footage that it had been edited, but it certainly had been edited. Now, the panel was made up of 3 people. There's termed a legally qualified chair, which could mean anything. It's a gentleman by the name of Stephen Chappell, but I couldn't actually find anything about him on the web, so I have no idea who he is. I had actually thought that he was serving a member of the judiciary, but that appears not to be the case, so he's just legally qualified. And the other 2 members of the panel were Chief Superintendent Andrew Slattery from Cumbria Police and Darren Packer, who is an independent member, which means fine, upstanding member of the community and most likely on the square, i.e. a member of the Funny Handshake Club. So we have the panel, and then we have obviously effectively the barrister bringing the case and then the barrister representing Inspector Kehoe. But that barrister wasn't instructed by you, was he?
No, I'd not instructed Mr. Gold. He was instructed by the IPCC to deal with the case, and I thought he did very, a very good job. He was very eloquent, and within the scope of what had actually been brought. Obviously the individual charges were wheedled down over the time that the IPCC dealt with it. They felt that the assault by the sergeant wasn't anything to write home about. So they concentrated on the actual fitting up by me of by Inspector Kehoe. And honed in on that, which I thought it was unusual at the time when they did that anyway. But the fact that they pressed the case and brought it to a gross misconduct hearing, I thought that the IPCC did quite a good job in the face of adamant refusals by GMP to accept any responsibility whatsoever.
Yeah, I must confess that initially I was struggling to understand how it was working, because a statement was made that Elliot Gold was the barrister who had been instructed by the Chief Constable. And so it sounded like it was the police versus the police, which to some extent, of course, it was. Now, I must confess I agree with you. I thought Elliot Gold did a very, very good job. And in fact, he certainly could not be accused of letting Inspector Kehoe have a free ride. I did think he missed one significant opportunity, though, and that was after you had given evidence, and the barrister representing Inspector Kehoe, Mr. Aldridge, he tried to cast aspersion on your character. First of all, trying to he basically tried to accuse you of being somewhat economic with the truth in your evidence. And now, whilst Elliot Gould keep saying Elliot Gould, he was an actor, wasn't he? Yeah, interestingly, I think he played the officer that eventually arrested Al Capone. That's another story. Anyway, yeah, so Elliot Gould, I thought he rebutted those accusations extremely well, but normally in a court of law, if a barrister or a witness questions the veracity of another person's evidence, then they have the opportunity to do the same. And of course, that would have perhaps brought up the opportunity to discuss Inspector Kehoe's previous experience of disciplinary hearings when he was heading up the Bolton drug squad.
Well, yeah, that would have been quite interesting if that case had been gone into. There was a particular stage when Mr. Gould did mention some case involving, I believe, some missing heroin.
Yeah, it was an aside. It was a very pointed aside for those that had the ears to hear.
So, I thought it was, he was going to mention that particular case, and that would have been most interesting. Obviously, it's been widely reported that for some reason Bolton, drug squad with Inspector Kehoe in charge didn't want to put heroin in their property office. Apparently, it wasn't secure enough that they must put it somewhere else. And obviously, that heroin then went missing. And the judge in the case of that particular one did say that, I believe, because they put a PC on trial for the loss of that heroin, and he said that I believe this PC is taking the fall for what is essentially a corrupt police unit, and it was Sergeant Kehoe that was running that at the time. Obviously, he was promoted to Inspector Kehoe on Barton Moss, and as we found out at the hearing, he's now Detective Inspector Kehoe. Certainly when I heard that, I thought, well, we've not much chance at getting any justice here if they're just going to promote him through the ranks, despite his behaviour, the video going viral, and it was bizarre that the methods that the defence, adopted of character assassination. I thought, well, what's the point? I mean, I provided video evidence of what went on. It's not my word. It's clear video evidence showing this corrupt officer, and it was just the defence tactic to say that, well, we're the police. When we're conducting an investigation, we can do what we want. If we want to give you a breathalyzer, if you don't comply, you're breaking the law, and we should be able to just hold you for hours without any basis to the charges. It was actually ludicrous what they were claiming, and I thought Mr. Gold put them in the place very well, saying, well, that's just not the law. That's obviously police officers of GMP see the law in one frame, and the actual judiciary approach it in a different one. But it was a very interesting case anyway.
No, it was, and I must confess that when I left Hayward Police Station on Thursday night, I wouldn't have liked at that time to have put money on the outcome, because I still wanted to believe that the IPCC appointed panel would do the right thing. My sense was, based on the evidence that was presented, I felt that it was probably a bit of a stretch to suggest that Inspector Kehoe was guilty of gross misconduct. But on everything that I saw and heard, and of course I was also trying to separate that day because, obviously those of us that were at Barton Moss for 5 months, we know very well how Kehoe behaved across that 5 months. So I had to sort of try and push that to one side. But on the evidence presented, I felt that it would be appropriate for him to have been found guilty of breaches of the police standards of professional conduct, and by definition, therefore, guilty of misconduct. Because, it was very apparent that he had an agenda, That agenda was to get you off the site. And, it was almost like somebody had said, OK, the first opportunity we get to remove Dr. Piers, let's go for it. And, it was like wanted, not quite dead or alive, but, wanted off of Barton Moss. And Kehoe thought he'd found that window of opportunity to achieve that. So when the panel read out their statement, which runs to some 14 pages here or so, when they read out their statement, effectively exonerating him from all charges, what was going through your mind at that time?
Well, I was just taking a note. I was, had a pen and pad, and I was just writing it down as we as they just dismissed stage after stage of everything. I thought, well, what complete whitewash, this officer's clearly brought the GMP force into disrepute. So the minimum I would have expected a slap on the wrist, some kind of note on his record just to say this is not the way you should behave. So to totally exonerate him in the face of clear video evidence, it was just bizarre in my mind. But it's things that we'd come to expect over the nearly 3 years of making police complaints. GMP had constantly refused to take any responsibility to hold any of their officers to account, and it took going all the way up to the IPCC, to their merits, who insisted on a gross misconduct hearing, and then, well, GMP conducted the gross misconduct. What kind of justice is that? The IPCC should be given a lot more teeth than it has to conduct their own hearings and make their own findings that that forces should stick to. GMP just seem to act above the law, and it's no surprise that they can assault people, they can take video evidence and kill people on the streets and in custody and get away with it. There's many recorded cases of this.
Absolutely, and ironic as it may seem, it is certainly the case in the US, where the situation regarding police misconduct is far greater than it is here. Percentage-wise, we still have a problem with it in the UK. But there is no question that the statistics show that when the police start wearing cameras or have dash cams filming incidents, then that does act as a sort of deterrent on at least one level to prevent them from overstepping the mark. But nonetheless, of course, we're coming to a stage now. Since Barton Moss, we really haven't had another major anti-fracking campaign where the gas companies are trying to get their infrastructure on the site. But of course, in the coming months, that's likely to change. And so although we've had the Balcombe and the Barton Moss campaign, and then we had Crawberry Hill, West Newton, there really hasn't been anything else. And yet, now, potentially, even by the end of November, it may well be that Third Energy are trying to get their infrastructure on the well site at Kirby Misperton, because they have permission to frack their existing well there. And of course, Saeed Javid has overturned Lancashire County Council, and although there will, I'm sure, be at least one judicial review into that decision, nonetheless, obviously, Quadrilla will be looking to try to get the well sites established and their bits in the ground sometime in 2017, along with other companies at Leith Hill in Surrey, at Wrestle in North Lincolnshire. Of course, INEOS are about to unleash their charm offensive. Well, it's certainly offensive, but they're looking to unleash their charm offensive across the north of England, where they have their locations. INEOS actually had the audacity to invite me to a meeting in their offices. Now, admittedly, that was in response to Tom Pickering, the operations director of INEOS, stating that they had tried to engage with the anti-fracking community, but every time they tried to talk to members of the anti-fracking community, they ran. So I actually tweeted and said, hey, I've just read about the anti-frackers running from your invitations to discuss where's my invitation? Anyway, the next thing I knew, I got an email from Peter Riley, who's the communications officer, PR, the Bell Pottinger wannabe of INEOS, inviting me to attend a meeting with them at their London office. But I wrote back and said, look, that's not going to happen. Any interaction I have with the unconventional gas industry will be in the public domain. And I invited them to participate in a debate, much along the same lines as we had in Harrogate a couple of weeks ago. But funnily enough, they're not really interested in doing that. They want to be able to control the narrative. So, we've got a lot going on. So, Steve, don't run away. I want to talk about something else that's going to be going on this week, because this week is the week when the anti-fracking community is drawing attention to Barclays' ownership of Third Energy, the company that wants to frack the existing well at Kirby Misperton, which lies literally right on the edge of the village. The village has some 146 houses, I think it is, but it's also just 1 kilometre from Flamingo Land, North Yorkshire's biggest tourism revenue earner. Well, we'll look at some of the things that have already kicked off, but there will be a number of other events going on around the country. So we're going to take a short break, and in this break, we're going to look at a short video looking at Barclays' involvement in this industry. And this video was put together by Fargo McCann. So this is the week that the UK anti-fracking community, this nefarious group, this multi-headed hydra, of independent, autonomous community groups all around the country are doing their own thing when it comes to raising awareness of Barclays' association with Third Energy. Now, Barclays own 97% of Third Energy, and regular viewers will know that Third Energy, in their last financial submission, was showing that they were operating at a loss of such significance that the net worth of the company was minus £45 million. Now, who do they owe that to? Of course, they owe it to the parent company, which is an offshore company, and this is how all of these companies operate, and they do this, obviously, to avoid paying any taxation. So consequently, I think we're in the last 3 days now of submissions being invited by the British government to discuss this whole issue of community benefits from the unconventional gas industry. The reality is that there won't be any. You know, like the likes of Quadrilla and iGas and INEOS, sponsoring fun runs, sponsoring local football teams, giving money to local councils for children's play areas. This is all chump change. It's pocket change. When it comes to the real deal, i.e. the alleged 10 million coming out of profits or coming out of taxation, isn't going to happen. Because not only are these companies operating in significant deficit right now, but they have also been given the opportunity to write off all of the prospective decommissioning costs before they start reporting any profitability whatsoever. And Barclays, of course, 97% ownership of Third Energy, so they're right in the thick of it. And this is from the weekend here, and this is the campaign outside Barclays Bank. Tell Barclays Bank not to frack in North Yorkshire. Let's have a look at a couple of slides here from that event. If I can pull up the right, there we go. A little bit of a local touch here, but look at it. I mean, this is not the usual. So this is not the hippies and the tree huggers and the dreadlocks that the mainstream media would suggest comprise the anti-fracking community. This is Middle England. These are North Yorkshire residents, heart of Tory-held constituency in Rydale. And, when they did a survey there, 90% of the people said they did not want fracking. Even their MP, Kevin Hollinsnake, he went over to Pennsylvania, and when he came back from Pennsylvania, he said that, there should be a significant distance between wells and personal property or public buildings, but he must have forgotten that the well at Kirby Misperton is literally right on the edge of the village. Here we go again. This is at Moulton. As you can see there, the police just checking in with one of the people engaging in the protest. Look, it is, forgive me, but in East Yorkshire, the people there that ran off Rathin Energy from Crawlbury Hill, who were, average age of early to mid 70s, and they refer to themselves as Jerry activists, and just not exclusively, but it's a similar demographic here in North Yorkshire, as it will be right across the country. There's our gentleman again. And then today in the branch, there's a couple here. This is Nikki Hollins and her daughter, and they set up their protest inside Barclays. And, look, this is not your usual suspect. It's my bet that this is probably the first time that Nikki and her daughter have ever felt so strongly about something that they've taken this step. And here's what Nikki said. She said, "I'm taking this action along with my daughter because if we stand back and do nothing, there will be nothing left to save. We have lived in Rydale for 10 years because we love living in an area that is so very beautiful and unspoiled. Rydale has some of the most stunning countryside and wildlife in the country, and we feel very blessed to live in such a special place. It must be protected so that it can be appreciated for generations to come, as it should be, with full access to clean water, air and land, and a safe climate. We are extremely worried about what fracking could do to Rydale. And my thanks to Ruth Hayhurst and her excellent website, Drill or Drop, for that information. Now, there's a whole host of events in the coming week at various branches of Barclays up and down the country. And if you want to get the latest update on whether or not there's something going on in your area, please go to Ruth's website. That's drillordrop.com. And there she has a listing of all of the events that she's aware of where local anti-fracking groups are going to take this opportunity to let customers of Barclays know that they are the owners of Third Energy, who quite possibly, have every intention of, being the first company to frack in this country since the moratorium was lifted by the British government in December of 2012. So hopefully, what we're expressing here is that people won't be afraid to join the protectors at the well sites. For many of us, a few years ago, we had never dreamed that we would be taking such a stance on the front line, or certainly very close to it. But now, more and more people from all over the country are saying enough is enough. Particularly in Lancashire, of course, where the Lancashire County Council said no and refused Quadrilla permission to establish well sites at both Preston New Road and Rossiter. And Saeed Yavid, the Muslim MP born in Rochdale, who has become an avid member of Conservative Friends of Israel, and he literally throws the last vestiges of local democracy out of the window. People use the phrase localism, but people think localism means local decision-making. No, it doesn't. Localism means, to the British establishment, it means incorporating local administration into central government policy, which is why government departments are now being pushed into the same buildings as city councils, as district and county councils, because they want that close proximity so that they can influence the decision-making process. So localism doesn't mean what you think, just like sustainability doesn't mean what you think. Sustainability is this much-used word, but it's straight out of Agenda 21. Now, of course, Agenda 2030. And sustainability means keeping the world so that those who think they are the rightful rulers, we consider them, of course, to be ruling parasites, but they think they can then literally do whatever it is they want to do within the earth, on the earth, for the benefit of the global corporatists. So it's an opportunity for every one of us to get involved. And one of the advantages of what's occurring is that it is bringing communities together like never before. And long may that continue. Now, Steve, as I said earlier, your arrest on January the 14th, 2014, literally pretty much coincides with the peak in the iGas stock price. I think it did actually reach 160 either on that day or thereabouts, £1.60 a share. But as you can see right now, it's at 13.38. In fact, it took a bit of a climb today, and I'm guessing that iGas have had a successful meeting with their bondholders, because iGas let it be known in their half-yearly report that they were actually not going to be able to service the bondholders as per the original agreements, and they were looking to meet with the bondholders so that they could defer further payments. Let me, explain what that means. What that means is that iGas are in deep doo-doo and effectively need to extend their line of credit. And with the price of oil still, it's well down. It's at, in fact, I think it's a little bit above 50. It's 50.56. Yeah, 50.56 today. So it looks like it's going to stabilise at around about the $50 mark. because this is the point at which OPEC members seem to be relatively comfortable. Iraq, of course, has refused to cut its output. They produce currently around about 3 million barrels a day, but the Iraqi oil minister has said that if it wasn't for the wars, we know who started them, if it wasn't for the wars, Iraq should be producing about 9 million barrels a day. But as I've discussed elsewhere, both Iraq wars, 91 and 2003, were all about obviously corralling Iraqi oil supplies to effectively keep it off the market or restrict its flow onto the market to enable prices to be kept artificially high. And, for anyone who still thinks that the hypothesis of peak oil has any merit, then, please just take a look at the physical evidence. There are more hydrocarbons on this planet than we could ever begin to think of using. Not that we should or need to, because, of course, there are many, many other alternatives out there. But it is interesting, Steve, that, on that day, the oil price, did the iGas stock start to go south, but of course, literally just a few weeks later, the oil price started to go seriously south, and came right down to below $50 a barrel for the first time in, I think, 10 years, or no, 8 years since 2008. It was $147 a barrel, wasn't it? Well, meanwhile, of course, even at $50, that's still $25 short of the point at which the unconventional gas industry is viable in the UK. Although the likes of INEOS, of course, they're not looking to exploit the gas for general usage. They're looking to exploit the gas for their own feedstock. And, of course, they're making a big play of bringing it in from the US and basically stating that the money that they're spending in the US should be going to Scotland. Well, the level of devastation in the US, I'm sure the INEOS directors just choose to completely ignore it. I mean, they literally go into a state of cognitive dissonance. So, Steve, I know you're not sort of perhaps quite as elated as you might like to be at this juncture, because it was an unjust decision. But obviously, there's a lot going to be going on over the next few weeks. So has this put you off participating in the anti-fracking campaign?
No, it's made me more determined than ever to make sure this industry doesn't get a foothold in this country. They're flogging a dead horse. I mean, 50% of the electricity generated in this country last year was through solar panels. We don't have a long way to go to get that to 100% like renewables in this country. Like a country like Iceland, fossil fuels, any new fossil fuels just don't have any foothold or in any position in the 21st century. We should be looking towards the future, and I'm here to, for as long as it takes to make sure that fracking is never accepted in this country. I'll be on every line, every position, filming and making sure that people get their voices heard, that their rights to peaceful protest are respected. And it's important that observers and every independent press agent gets out on the front line and records what's going on, because the only way that they can push this industry on us is through dishonest means by paying corporations like Greater Manchester Police to brutalise protesters, to get them out of the way so that they can push those lorries and drill bits through. We don't want any drilling going on in this country whatsoever.
And, of course, the police in Humberside at Crawley Hill made it very clear that they would not facilitate peaceful protest whilst they had numerical superiority. But once that situation changed, they would revise and review their strategy. So it's very clear.
I don't know if you know about the Lincolnshire site when we were protesting there, when you were doing the Horse Hill site down south. we took up position in Lincolnshire at the Lawton site there, and Lincolnshire police out and out respected the right to peaceful protest, and actually told the lorry drivers that we had every right to slow walk them up the mile or so of the road, and that's exactly what we did. We walked all the lorries in and out of that site, and full marks to Lincolnshire Police for respecting that right to peaceful protest.
Unfortunately, we haven't really seen that anywhere else, and obviously the situation is going to escalate because the British government and the industry are determined to get their bits in the ground. And it's very evident that the British public don't want it. 90% don't want it. Of course, 90% aren't going to take to the streets, but a significant percentage, an increasing percentage of people will do, because I'm not proud of the legacy that we are leaving future generations. And anyone with a social conscience will take a look at this and come to their own realization that this is an industry that has left a trail of destruction and ecological devastation wherever it has become established. Now, Fracking Nightmare is, as far as I'm aware, the only regular news output on this industry anywhere in the world, and we have every intention of maintaining it. We're getting very, very close to episode 100. It'll be very interesting to see whether Third Energy can actually get their infrastructure onto the well site at Kirby Misperton before we reach episode 100. That's not a challenge, by the way. But if you'd like to see these programs continue, then please do consider making a donation. If you go to the frackingnightmare.com website, frackingnightmare.com, where you can certainly always see the latest episode. And on the left-hand side of the page there, you'll see the opportunity to make a donation. And the donations go to primarily the costs of me getting to the studio from the north of England, and also, obviously, to the general running costs. So thank you very much for joining us. Steve, thank you very much. And obviously, that's one down. I'm sure that this isn't the end of your pursuit of trying to get an appropriate level of justice for what occurred at Barton Moss. But we'll leave that to another time. But thanks for joining us this evening, and I look forward to hooking up with you on the front line somewhere in the not too distant future.
Not a problem, Ian. I'll be there, and yeah, you keep at it. You do some great, important work at getting the word out there, and I think all the fracking companies are shaking in their boots every time you launch a new episode. So congratulations.
Well, I don't think they're necessarily shaking in the boots, but we've certainly got their attention. Now, meanwhile, I think you have some good news as well. Just to close, you have some good news from the courts regarding the arrests at the Upton eviction.
Well, yes, some very good results today. Labour councillor Matt Bryan. No case to answer in his case of obstruction of a PC. I think it started as obstruction of the highway and suddenly morphed into obstruction of the PC. But his case was thrown out. Louise Hammond, she was the lock-on that was at the front gate of the Upton eviction. I filmed it from the tower, where they spent about 5 hours with still saws and heavy equipment drilling through that lock-on. That case was thrown out because she wasn't on the actual field. She was on the public highway. And John Hall was another one thrown out today. So we've had a series of victories today, relating to the Upton eviction, where the police have misbehaved, and bizarre statements submitted by bailiffs that say, well, that's not my statement. So what Cheshire Police are doing, making up statements, I'm not quite sure. But witnesses haven't been produced, bailiffs haven't been produced. So there seems very little incentive to push these cases as far as the bailiffs are concerned. I think they just want to get people off the site so they can get the drills on and brush everything under the carpet.
Which just adds further to the observation that what we're seeing in this country is the police being used as corporate enforcers and that the arrests in most cases are purely intimidatory. So I am absolutely of the opinion that the UK will not be fracked, but whether that opinion actually turns into reality is absolutely dependent on communities right across the country doing the research for themselves and coming to their own determination as to whether or not this is an industry that they want in their or any other backyard. Thanks for joining us this evening. We'll be back next Monday at 9 o'clock.